Welcome to Ed's Not Dead. I'm Robbie Dodd. I am joined by my co-host, Mr. C.H. Siddons. Hey, Casey.
Hey, welcome back.
Welcome back to you and Mr. Peter Crable.
Hey, great to see you.
We are Ed's Not Dead. Welcome back, folks. We have a great show for you today. As always, Ed's Not Dead is brought to you by Ed's Not Dead Media, a podcast media company that curates high-quality audio stories across a variety of genres. You can always find us on Twitter at Ed's Not Dead PC and check out the website edsnotdead.com. Hey boys, how are you? It's good to see you guys.
Yeah, nice to be back and on the saddle doing the show.
Good to be back.
It's been a little bit. We have a great show for our listeners. We are incredibly honored to have Dean of the School of Education at Howard University, Dr. Leslie Fenwick, who we were pushing just a few months back to be the Secretary of Education, and Sleepy Joe didn't listen to us, Mr. Siddons. he chose someone else.
Well, that's why she came on the show. She heard our endorsement and was like,
"Yeah, she was all
powerful
about it.
National organization.
I need to get on this podcast.
Got to get on."
Yeah. So, I'm good job, Casey. We're very psyched to have Dr. Fenwick on the show. She's going to be a great guest. We were thrilled when we read her background. And then
she's a very gracious person. She was very closely emailing me, and it was just good to talk with her. Even you got a good feel, just a good vibe.
We might not have been able to get her on the show if she had gotten the big gig.
Oh, definitely not.
No.
Secret Service protection and everything. No.
All right. What are you boys up to? What have you been up to? Mr. Krabs, how are you over there?
Doing great. Just springtime weather is finally starting to turn. So trying to spend every second outside that I can.
You weren't afflicted by your seasonal doldrums this year, were you?
No, I also didn't get sick at all this winter, which was incredible.
I haven't had a cold in a year.
Not a sniffle.
Yeah,
not even a runny nose. It was incredible.
That's called not being in school.
Well,
yes, that's correct.
It's called wearing a mask too.
That's true
not
too.
Being around people,
right? It also really speaks volumes about your personal hygiene and how poor it probably is.
Oh, absolutely.
Every 3 weeks you're getting the sniffles that you're maybe not washing your hands quite enough.
I think flu cases across the world are down to literally nothing.
Yeah, to essentially none.
Yeah.
Mr. Siddons, how about you? How are things? How's the baby girl?
Oh, great. We're doing great. Big mulch delivery next week. Excited about.
I knew when I asked it, we were headed towards home improvement. Bob Vila over here. Big
Very
mulch.
excited.
How many yards?
Take a guess.
Okay. I'm going to say 4 yards of mulch.
Ooh, 7.
Ooh, okay. I was over half.
Last year, every year I order not enough. And I decided I'm going big.
Are you going shredded hardwood, or are you going pine chips?
No. Dyed brown.
Okay,
it's shredded.
That's lame. The dyed mulch is lame.
What do you mean? It's fine.
I'm just kidding. No, that's nice. That'll be good. Don't put it on too thick around those trunks of your trees.
You got to make a little tire. You know what I mean? A little tire. Little tire.
All right. Well, it's good to be back. It's that time of the show where Casey does show feedback, and I'm looking at the show notes, and it's sparse.
I'm going to share. Well, I'm in the practice of only sharing one piece of feedback from listeners, and this is from actually our previous guest from last show, Dan Reed, who gave us. We love when we get some quote tweets and retweets. And he said, this is a great podcast hosted by 3 educators, and I had a blast talking with them. And he also posted on his Facebook page, too, which we appreciate.
Dan.
I got some feedback. I totally forgot about this. I'm sorry.
Dan from Just Up the Pike. That's a pretty sweet tweet. Yeah. Since I'm never on Twitter, I didn't see that, Mr. Sids. Did we get any love on that tweet?
Oh, yeah. We got some good retweets on it. But feedback on the episode was I think very positive from folks that reached out to me, and I think they appreciate hearing about the discussions on housing policy and how it impacts education policy, because as we've discussed before, people don't think about it being one impacting the other.
Yeah, and I got some feedback. Somebody I've known for a long time, a buddy of mine, Hassani, Finally got around to listening. Got to get
four years in.
It took him 4 years.
Better late than never.
Okay. Yeah, he said he especially liked this episode with Dan Reed in talking about his own personal experiences growing up in segregated neighborhoods and his family growing up in segregated neighborhoods, really for the last 100 years, in like the various fights, zoning, things like that have gone on. So it was definitely good to hear from him. And I do think, Casey, to your point, a lot of people, it struck a chord with them just to think about local issues and how it affects schools. And we kind of laughed about zoning, but it's a thing, and boundaries are very important and are heavily invested in them.
Yep.
Yeah, we're gonna ask Dr. Fenwick about that.
Yes.
Before we get to the break and Dr. Fenwick, I wanted to ask you about a recent op-ed in the Los Angeles Times titled "The Big Post-Pandemic Educational Mess and What It Will Take to Solve It" by Morgan Polikoff. So the writer, Casey, you sent this to us, I think, right? The writer essentially discusses how the sense of learning loss and the impact on kids has vacillated over the last year. At one point, it's awful, and kids have lost so much, particularly students of color or students who live in poverty. And then the pendulum swings the other way, and you read pieces about how it's maybe not so bad, and that it's afforded kids other opportunities, both with their families and at home and in their communities, to have other experiences. I'm pretty accurate, right? There's been this back and forth swing over the last year. Well, this most recent piece is back towards the extreme of that, that it's had a tremendously onerous impact. For example, now nearly 40% of third graders in majority black schools are 2 or more grade levels below in reading. And that a recent national survey of parents of teenagers found that 46% have noticed a new or worsening mental health condition in their children, and even more for teen girls. So there's some pretty stark statistics here in this op-ed that point to the crisis and what needs to happen then in reopening. I texted you all and said that I was somewhat underwhelmed by the writer's recommendations for reopening and what needs to happen over the next year or two.
Well, they're pretty light in details.
Yeah, they're pretty light. So the first thing that the writer says is that the federal government needs to have a more robust role in directing states and municipalities towards what works in making up for learning loss, and then goes into 3 points. The first, Casey, I know you're going to love this, and this is why I was surprised that you even sent the article. Ongoing measurement. I think we know what that means, right?
Yeah.
Second, interventions.
But with the first one, the ongoing measurements are not just standardized testing. It's measurement of student social emotional health and well-being as well.
Okay. All right. So thank you for adding that. And then last, interventions need to be targeted to those who need them most. I literally felt like I was back in the No Child Left Behind era when I read these three. This seems to me just to be a playbook that's kind of warmed over and rehashed. I want your opinion on this approach to the next year or two, especially you, Casey, with what you've learned in your interviews on Pandemic Pass.
Well, I think, with just to talk about the ongoing measurement, I have such problems with standardized testing, as you know, but
it will be standardized testing.
It will be standardized testing, and there needs to be. I've come around to the fact that we need to figure out where our kids are whenever we are fully back, or whenever the time seems necessary. We need to get a sense of where our students are, baseline data, so we know how and where to move forward. I'm interested to see what that social and emotional health and well-being assessment would look like. Maybe it's not a traditional test, but maybe it's the one-on-one conferences that we have with more counselors hired in school systems, or social service workers or social workers or things like that we are going to hire or have more money to hire in schools to actually have these kind of conversations to figure out where our students are, because the mental health and well-being of our kids is not in a good place at present.
Yeah, and I think
Mr. Krabs?
there was a couple points that stuck out to me. So one sentence in particular, it said our educational systems are poorly designed from the standpoint of identifying what works and then providing it equitably to students and families. So I am in agreement with that, because I feel that way sometimes, where I certainly don't have all the research, and the research that I do find, to be honest, is mostly as a result of this show that I have to like seek out and find that has made me. And so when I think about educators across the country, I know that experience is extremely valuable. But there is also research that clearly demonstrates specific things that are more or less useful. And so then there are also a sentence in here that about local control, but it says, although generally we do want local control, that state and national leaders must step in to provide clear and specific guidance on the best ways to spend the American Rescue Plan dollars to address the negative impact. So I think, and I texted this when we were kind of talking about doing it, and I think it's a slippery slope, right? Because you get into a course of accountability, you get into race to the top, you get into all the eggs in one basket, if you think about race to the top, of teacher accountability measures, progress, etc. And I think what I would like to see is like a menu of best practices that state and local jurisdictions could choose from. We know that this works. We know that this works. We know that this works. A variety of things. And then they could choose which one they wanted to implement. Now, I think all too often it's like a black and white issue where it's the federal government is telling you exactly what to do, and there's all this like resentment from that. Or they're just giving vast sums of money, and then everybody's just making up what to do, but maybe they're not really qualified, or maybe they're not really in a position to come up with whole new ways of thinking. When like if you just give me 10 options, I can pick which one is best. So I mean, I think as far as the article goes, it's pretty light on detail, but I think the thing that I did take away from it is I would like to see at least a little bit of guidance from the federal government about, you're about to get a lot of money. Here are things that we know that work. Pick which one works best for your local school district.
I'm also curious as to what the federal government could do. I mentioned it in our thread about something on modeling like the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, where you're sending people out to do the work that needs to be done to improve our nation. And I think it's something that can be done if we hire recent graduates from high school and college to train them on like mentorship and send them out into schools across the nation where they're working with kids after hours. So the kids are there for an hour and a half after school or whatever, before school, whatever it may be, whatever the school district wants to be flexible in. But I think that one-on-one or at least small group interaction is going to be very helpful given the fact that our students have been so isolated for the past year.
How about incentivizing a whole new generation of teachers? See, that's where,
yes.
I mean, that's where I quibble with this piece, because with the pandemic provided a certain margin to, in my mind, to address what wasn't working pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
What we can acknowledge, right, that the reason kids are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic is because they were already impacted by things that we don't do well pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So why aren't we taking a bigger, grander approach to changing schools?
Yeah.
With an opportunity that you get once a century.
Yeah.
To rethink what we do, like you just mentioned, something bold. I mean, what I just read in that piece could have come out of a school improvement plan.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to measure, you're going to intervene, and you're going to do it for a focus group of kids.
Right.
So it just doesn't move the needle for me.
And, Leslie Fenwick, coming up next, she's going to talk about revolutionizing the school system. And one of the things that I fear most is that when we do fully go back to school and, business as usual, quote unquote, is that it literally looks exactly the same as before we left.
Exactly.
That is
And that
scary.
is
Scary.
an insane thought, but
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Check out this piece. It is by.
I'll put it in the show notes.
You put it in the show notes. It's by Morgan Polikoff, who is an associate professor of education at USC, is the author of Beyond Standards, The Fragmentation of Education Governance and the Promise of Curriculum Reform. Mr. Crable, it is not about curriculum. I just want you to know that.
Okay.
The kids are all right.
We keep coming back to that every show. Mr. Crable's famous blog.
Oh my God.
What was it titled? It's not the curriculum dummy or student?
Curriculum is not the answer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it wasn't that mean. All right. Don't go anywhere. We are incredibly excited to have Dr. Leslie Fenwick, the Dean of the School of Education at Howard University, when we come back. Fellas, we are incredibly excited and gratified to have Dr. Leslie Fenwick on the show. Hi, Dr. Fenwick. How are you? It's great to have you on Ed's Not Dead. Welcome.
Greetings. Glad to be here. Please call me Leslie.
All right, Leslie, let's get started. We are going to jump into the pandemic question. Casey Siddons actually has another podcast called The Pandemic Pass, and he covers a lot of things related to reopenings and learning loss. So let's start with a question on really the pressing issue of our day over the last year, reopenings and learning loss. What do you think schools need to do to repair the damage from the last year for so many kids, especially our students of color in our public schools in the United States?
Well, first, I think I would respond to that in three ways. First, it's a shame that we're here. You know, in the early 1900s, the U.S. Invested in the biological sciences. We saw that investment in K-12 schools and in higher ed. And so what that meant for our country is that we have the world's best virologists, the world's best epidemiologists, the world's best immunologists, and the world's best public health service. And so had our public health as a nation not been politicized, the nation's children and youth and adolescents and youth and adults, we'd not be in this situation. This is the first time in the history of our country that we've closed nearly all of our schools, both K-12 and higher ed. So the first thing I would say is it is a tragedy and a travesty, and we recognize this, that we're in this place. The second thing I would say is, I began my career as a fourth grade teacher and later was a middle school teacher. I've taught students literally from kindergarten through the doctoral level. And one of the essential requirements of attending school, having school open, is that teachers and students feel safe. Yeah. They feel safe in the environment, whether that safety has to do with the school culture, the school climate, physical safety from harm. And that leads me to my third point. So we have to have a level of a feeling of safety in schools. And then thirdly, right now we don't have a uniform sense among teachers, administrators, and other school personnel and children and parents that they'll be safe when they come to school. I do think that the Biden administration's goal to follow public health, to follow science, to ensure that schools and communities have resources in the schools and to get those resources allocated appropriately so that parents and students and teachers and administrators and other school personnel can feel safe is very, very important. So it's a safety issue. It's a safety and security issue, and much of that is about our mental disposition to it all. Of course, we also know that the pandemic has kind of ripped away this thin veneer that really, for those of us and each of us on this call, know this to be true because we're educators. was a thin veneer hiding what we knew, which is that there are massive inequities in terms of how we fund schools and the access to resources that children get that are differentiated along lines of race, gender, culture, and wealth. And so now we see it. And we have a responsibility to address this in some new ways.
So, do you want to talk about some of the new ways? I'd love to hear your perspective on.
I'd like to talk about some of those new ways. In my role as Dean in Residence at the American Association for Colleges of Teacher Education, AACTE, I had the opportunity to interview 13 leaders in higher education, in the foundation world, and also a group of executive directors and nonprofits that are devoted to equity, that have had a history of addressing equity issues. And so these were presidents and CEOs and executive directors of Carnegie Foundation, Kellogg Foundation, Edutopia. Some of these were board members, deans of schools and colleges of education from Clark Atlanta University and HBCU to Florida International University, which prepares the largest number of Latinx teachers for the country, to the dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Education, to executive directors at the NAACP, Excellencia in Education. I'm giving you an example of some of the folks I talked to. And I asked them, do we need a revolution to rectify what's wrong in public education? And to a T, these individuals, these leaders, said yes. I thought that they would hesitate at that word revolution. In other words, you're not expecting a president of a foundation or board member to say, yes, revolution. Maybe, academics, maybe those of us in the trenches of education would say, yes, we need a revolution. But there was broad, wide, and uniform realization by these individuals who are largely outside of education but attached to our enterprise, that unless we change some of the foundational assumptions that are guiding what we do, we're not going to get something new. So what does that mean? We need to reanalyze how we're funding K-12 education and why we have in higher ed students still paying for tuition primarily from student loans. We need to reanalyze how we deliver our curriculum, a curriculum that is primarily white in authorship, content, and imagery. We need to reanalyze and recommit to a race equity agenda that centers Black and Latinx and other students of color and people of color. We need to ditch this deficit model and embrace an asset model around research and commentary about Black communities and Latinx communities, other communities of color, and those that have been marginalized. So there's something new right now that will move us forward, because I don't think we're returning to our pre-COVID realities. In order to move us forward, it's a time of reanalyzing these foundational assumptions. Who are we? What are we trying to do? And where are we trying to go? And we've got to do this because, when I was in graduate school, I started paying attention to this when I was in my PhD program. The demographers were saying by 2075, America, the majority of American citizens would be people of color. Before I could get out of graduate school, and it didn't take me 10 years, it took me, they had dropped it to 2055. Yeah. I'm talking about in the 90s. They had dropped the prediction to 2055. And then when I began my career, in the early 90s as well, as a faculty member, a junior faculty member, it was 2045. And I say, and now the prediction is 2024, and I really say it's 2020. We're here. I mean, we're past here, and we see this, right? So each of us has been in schools as teachers and administrators. So in 2015, for the first time in the history of public schools, the majority of our student population nationwide became students of color. That same year, the majority of the public school population, the majority of the student population was from families that were experiencing poverty. Okay, so the majority of public school students are students of color, and they're also students from families experiencing poverty. We knew that in K-12. A lot of times we put up these artificial walls between K-12 and higher ed and talk about the two contexts, like they don't impact one another. But now, for the first time, in 2017-18 academic year, the majority of students who are in public colleges and universities, which are about half the nation's colleges and universities, are non-white. So we're seeing that mirroring, that demographic shift. And in the 2018-19 academic year, in 12 states, Puerto Rico and DC, the majority of college students attending public institutions were non-white students. So this demographic shift that we're experiencing, it's going to make us re-examine some of our foundational assumptions about who gets educated, who we're going to invest in, who we care about, making it into a productive civic life.
One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is, and at where I work, we have a teacher academy, and in my high school, it's one of the most diverse high schools in the county. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad to have this teacher academy because it needs to be in our school, because we need to create a pipeline for teachers who look like the students that we serve. You've written extensively about the need to diversify the teaching workforce. We're currently at like 80% white teachers. And what do you feel like in your research and your work? What are the biggest barriers facing educators of color, and how can we build? What are the things that we need to do system-wide, federally, statewide, to have a teaching force that more accurately reflects the diversity of our country?
I think this is such an important question. Again, given the demographic profile of K-12 students and higher education students and the emerging demographic profile, we know, just as you said, Casey, there's this huge demographic mismatch between the school personnel, principals, and teachers who serve students. So let's pretend for a minute we're going to go and across the country and go inside inner city, go inside urban centers into inner cities. 73% of teachers in inner city schools are white. If you come out of the inner city but stay in an urban center, about 91% of teachers in urban schools are white. And we can do that same exercise with principal leadership, and the statistics are comparable. The majority, about 62% of inner city principals are white. Mm. So one of the things we know from the research is that academic and social benefits accrue to African American and Latinx students when they're in highly diverse staffed schools. They're less likely to be misplaced in special education, more likely to be tested for gifted education, more likely to graduate high school in 4 years, and less likely to be expelled. We now have almost 40, 50 years of research, longitudinal studies that show that African American teachers elicit in certain grades higher performance on mathematics and English achievement on standardized tests, college matriculation rates, high school graduation. So we have the data, the quantitative data and the qualitative data to say that diversely staffing our schools helps students.
Now, all students too.
All students.
Yeah, Robbie's talked about it, where it's like it not only benefits our students of color, but our white students as well.
Absolutely, for a whole host of reasons. One, it teaches all students that knowledge generation, creativity, intellectual ability does not reside in one group of people. It's the work of all groups of people. So that modeling of intellectual authority being in diverse people is so important to all students. Now, how do we get there? How did we get here? And then how do we get to the place where all of our students are seeing these diverse models of intellectual authority? In order to answer the question about how we got here, we have to go back to the Brown decision. So prior to Brown, Thurgood Marshall, who we all know was one of the crafters, the creators of this new jurisprudential theory that won Brown. Marshall knew, as did the NAACP, that with Brown, the likelihood of Black teachers and principals losing their jobs was high. Remember, Brown did not say close all the Black schools. Brown said separate and equal had no place in public education in the United States of America. So what happened on the tail end of the decision, the only jurisdiction that immediately desegregated was Washington, D.C. And some say that's why we have Northern Virginia, but I won't get into that kind of whole history. But Washington, D.C. schools immediately desegregated, the only jurisdiction in the country. For at least 25 years, 30 years, we had resistance to the Brown decree in the 17 dual system states, which meant that school officials, state officials, from governors to mayors to school boards to superintendents, were fighting the true integration of students and teachers and principals. So Black schools were closed in most jurisdictions, and Black principals and teachers were summarily fired, dismissed, and demoted. And it's that history.
Something like 40,000? It
was really more than that. I've written a book that I'll be able to more formally announce, I think this summer. And the title of the book is Jim Crow's Pink Slip, Public Policy and the Decimation of Black Principal and Teacher Leadership in American Education. I know that's a mouthful.
Look how excited Casey's
getting. We'll just say Jim Crow's Pink Slip for right now. But I trace that history because the research literature has been hesitant to link that history that was a purposeful constriction of the Black educator pipeline. I talk about the strategies used, the numbers which have been underestimated in the literature, and how that explicitly links to now. So this history, post-Brown in the 17 dual system states, we've not recovered from. You know, prior to Brown, in the dual system states, 35 to 50% of educators were Black, were African American. There's no state today that approaches that percentage in terms of representation in the principalship or the teaching force. So if we look nationally, what do we have about, Robert, about 14,000 superintendents, less than 3% are African American.
That's crazy.
If we look at the nation's 93,000 or so principals, about 11% are African American. And of course, you already know the statistics on teachers, about 7 or 8% are African Americans. And this has an explicit history. I do think we can move forward from this history because there's been a consistent concern. The majority of Americans, when polled, say they believe in integration, they say they believe in diversity. We have strong engines for the production of Black teachers. HBCUs, produce about 50% of the nation's Black teachers, even though HBCUs are only 3% of the nation's colleges and universities. So there are these strong engines. 2 HSIs, 2 Hispanic serving institutions, produce 90% of the nation's Latinx teachers. So we need our more mainstream, traditionally white institutions to embrace this diversity goal and to look at the barriers to recruiting. Education is still a top 10 major at HBCUs. There's an interest in the field to become an educator. Many HBCUs, as you know, are serving first generation students. And what's one of the quickest ways to join the middle class? Become a teacher. It's a salaried position that typically has been a stable job and well regarded in the Black community and in some other communities of color. So we have a lot of work to do there, and I think that some of that work is dismantling barriers like licensure exams, passing licensure exams to enter teacher education. I know when I came through the University of Virginia, we didn't have Praxis 1 or any of these other licensure exams that were entrances into the profession because you're a college student. You've taken the SAT, the ACT, you have a GPA, you've been accepted to college. So you were accepted into the School of Education. You got the treatment of teacher education. Now you got to pass the licensure exam in order to graduate out of a teacher education program. That's a reasonable expectation. But these entrance licensure exams, all they did was further constrict and almost they were the ruination of a new generation of Black students. I saw the pipeline of Black students who were interested in becoming teachers just dry up. I literally saw it based on these arbitrarily set cutoff scores for entrance licensure exams into the field.
I call it the over-professionalization of teaching. That's I agree with you, Dr. Fenwick.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, I was really concerned about that because, African-American students, pre-service teachers, and white pre-service teachers perform comparably on the exit licensure exams, which means that when both groups or all groups of these pre-service teachers get the treatment called teacher education, the pedagogy courses, the content courses, and then they take the licensure exam, they perform. The entrance exams do nothing but weed capable students, I think, out of the profession. I remember my youngest brother is a professor like me of ed policy at an institution at a university in Atlanta. And he, like me, taught before he went into higher ed. Was a teacher of the year in Virginia for his district and won all these accolades in Georgia. He passed the entrance exam into teacher ed by 1 point and had a high GPA, but passed the entrance exam by 1 point and has just was a phenomenal middle school English teacher for 14 years and a reading specialist. So I think we need to really kind of look at how those scores have been set. And we've known really since the 1970s that the tests have been used to purposely constrict Black teachers, push them out of the profession, or prospective teachers out of the profession.
Right. Last question. Oh, but before I ask it, interesting local historical fact. There's a famous picture of Justice Marshall. He was an attorney at the time, standing on the steps of the Rockville Courthouse in Montgomery County, talking about, with other attorneys, a case that I think is largely considered the first case on the road to Brown, which was a suit for the equal pay of Black and white teachers in Montgomery County. And that was really the beginning of it all. So we've talked, Dr. Fenwick, about equity. It's well documented, I think, that since the 1980s, school systems across the nation have largely ceased to actively take steps to continue to desegregate schools. On this show, we've talked about this new era of segregation in school systems across the nation, what role do you think the public sector, particularly government, should assume to reinvest in equity and integration in our public schools?
Well, in my book, I trace the exact moment when we stopped talking about integration as a proposition that not only involved the nation's students, but our teachers and principals. So we bifurcated. We just dropped. I talk about that the exact day. I traced it to the exact day that we stopped talking about integration as a function of having Black teachers and principals in schools along with Black students. I think the continued, focus on the value of diversity is helpful. The continued bringing forth of data that shows the value of diversity. We are not going to be able to avoid this issue. We're here. The majority, or soon, very, very soon to be, the majority of the American population is people of color. And so if we're to continue this experiment in any productive way, the groups that have been marginalized, held at the margins of the economic, political, social order, will have to be integrated. They can no longer be kind of captured in the education and economic friction equation, meaning their education doesn't manifest in any substantive way in terms of engagement and independence in the economy.
Thank you. And I can remember the 70s and the 80s. And my dad was involved in desegregation in the 60s. And at one time, the federal government took a robust kind of position on desegregating schools that resulted in lawsuits and busing and lots of things that the American public didn't necessarily like, but to a degree it worked. And it just doesn't seem to me that the political will exists much anymore, whether it's a boundary analysis or the creation of magnet programs, or there's very little that seems to be done now. And we've talked a lot about that on this show.
I really think it's about, when you listen to some of Johnson's speeches on these topics, it was about a moral commitment, kind of a high-minded commitment to what we wanted to see America be, or at least project to the remainder of the world. I think we're in another one of those places where we can reignite this moral commitment, because we're not going back. So we're going towards something. So what is this something that we're going to create? My hope is that we're able to ignite that kind of common commitment to a public good. That's my hope. I know the last election showed that we still have a great deal of divisiveness in our country around issues that are related, quite frankly, to race and racism. And this spoken and unspoken, more often now spoken notion that the country, its resources, even its history, its story, belong to certain people and not other people. And any tinkering with that story, any tinkering with those resources, suggests that ownership does not belong to all of us.
Yeah, the coalition the coalition that changes it needs to be diverse for the first time ever.
It has to be.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think that was the beauty of Black Lives Matter.
Right.
When those images were all these young people of every hue. I mean, certainly led by, the concept, the leadership, the revolutionary thought, the courage was the Black women who founded Black Lives Matter. And were unrelenting in what they had to say in the movement. And then all their ability to gather people of all hues and center them. It's just brilliant. The movement and those women, their leadership strategy needs to be studied so deeply. It wasn't just, when I think about the women that started Black Lives Matter, because that's the movement we're living in, right? That's the era. They are comparable to Charles Hamilton Houston and Thurgood Marshall and James Nabert. What was so amazing about then those Black men? It wasn't just their moral commitment to desegregating society. It was the fact that they evolved new jurisprudential theory. They made up new theory to convince this court of 9 white men who didn't want to go this way, but had to be convinced because they came up with a new way of interpreting the law. And really, when you read more about Marshall and Nabert and Charles Hamilton Houston, they were intending Brown to be a stab in the eye with an ice pick of white supremacy. That's really what they were going after. Now, we've pasteled that history, make it all nice and clean and moral commitment, which was true. But there was a deep strategy here. And the women that started Black Lives Matter, it wasn't just screaming Black Lives Matter. There was a deep strategy there that I think needs unpacking. Their theory of action, their leadership theory, which has produced a new moment in the world. Just it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. So
I think there really is an opportunity to activate or continue activating this moral commitment to the right way.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Fenwick. Now is the time that we've all been waiting for, which is the Casey Siddons.
So you call me Dr. Fenwick, I'm going to have to call you Principal Dodd.
That's right.
Hello, Principal Dodd.
Hello, Principal Dodd and Vice Principal.
I wouldn't mind being called Dr. Dodd.
You should call him Bobby Dodd. Bobby Dodd.
Well, it's the doctor is new enough for Robbie that he still thinks everybody should call him that.
That's right.
Okay. All right. This is what always happens. All right, Leslie. This is the time of the show where Casey does his infamous quiz. Are you ready?
I am not ready.
You're going to do
I'm a
great.
little scared, but I'm going to go ahead. I got my pen in hand.
All right.
You were a 4th grade teacher. You'll be fine.
You're going to do great. So Dr. Fenwick, Dr. Leslie Fenwick, thank you so much for joining us on Ed's Not Dead today. We are so lucky to have you on the show. To end our show, as Dr. Dodd said, we always include our infamous guest quiz to test your mettle with the most relevant and useful trivia knowledge. So Dr. Fenwick, your guest quiz today is all about your surname. What else do you know about another famous Fenwick? The Fenwick Tower in Halifax, Canada, an interesting and controversial building and apartments, to say the least. Are you ready?
Yes. I know nothing. What does Schultz say on Hogan's Heroes?
I don't think anybody knows.
Neither did I until about 3 hours ago. Okay. Number 1, the Fenwick Tower in Halifax, Canada has since seen a new use by a local university. Prior to its rehabilitated outside, a journalist described it as, quote, I examine how Fenwick Place, that was designed to express an idealistic future through its brutalist idiom, is now widely considered an architectural what? A marvel for all to see, B, a crime against humanity, or C, an accomplishment?
I would say a marvel.
Oh, it's actually a crime against humanity.
I started to say that.
I just looked up a picture. It's pretty ugly.
It's pretty bad. This one gets better. Number 2, sticking with our Fenwick Tower. When it gets windy, the Fenwick Tower reportedly sways so much that which of the following happens? A, the water sloshes in the toilets. B, there's a pool on the top floor that can't be filled because the weight of the water would topple the building. Or C, exert so much pressure that tenants 2 floors below wouldn't be able to open the doors to their apartments? Or D, all of the above?
All of the above.
That's correct. All of the above.
That's easier.
Modern engineering marvel.
That's right. And number 3, the last question, unless you want to have the bonus one as well. When the Fenwick Towers were first built and used in the early 1970s, which of the following issues were pervasive? A, tenants who wanted to move between floors must pound on the doors and yell their floor number into the shaft. B, angry neighbors would fling water balloons with a slingshot into tenant plate glass windows. Or C, students did not treat the facilities with dignity.
I wish you were going to say D, all of the above. I'm going to go with, it's either A or the slinging of water balloons, but I'm going to go with A.
A is correct. The elevators were run by an operator at all times, and apparently you had to shout into the shaft to get the elevator to come to your floor. And interestingly, the flinging water balloons happened to me as a college freshman, where someone in the adjacent dorm used a slingshot to slam it through my plate glass window while I was working an all-nighter, and I got hit in the face with glass and water. So anyway.
Oh, God.
So Leslie, you did great. 2 out of 3. You win.
All right.
What do I win? Do I get an Ed's Not Dead t-shirt?
We have stickers.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. A wonderful sticker.
I like stickers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fenwick. Casey, I thought you were going to ask a very famous fly rod. I have one.
Yes.
You know that
I do.
The Fenwick company makes fly rods, and I have a Fenwick fly rod. So I thought you were going to go outdoor gear, but you didn't.
I had one question about, it's called the Fenwick number in hockey, but I don't understand it. So
okay,
I went with something else.
All right. I think it's well known, fellas, that, and we don't have to be shy about it, that we a couple months ago had thrown our hugely
hearty endorsement.
Yeah, hearty endorsement behind Dr. Fenwick for the Secretary of Education position.
It's on the record.
Yeah, we were really excited, and we just want to congratulate you, Leslie, on being so highly considered for that position. When we read about you, that's, we automatically A, wanted you to get the position,
Mm-hmm.
and B, wanted to get you on the show. So congratulations on that.
But if you had gotten it, we wouldn't have been able to have you.
I know, we wouldn't have been able to book her. She would have been too big time for us.
Well, now if it happens at some future point, with maybe even another administration, we have a connection.
We got
right.
the ins. Yeah.
The vetting process was amazing. So exhilarating and amazing.
I bet.
All right. So before we let you go, your book is coming out. You drop that this summer. Give our audience the title again and when you think it'll be released.
I think it'll be released either by the end of this year, 2021, or early 2022. And it's Jim Crow's Pink Slip: Public Policy and the Decimation of Black Principal and Teacher Leadership in American Education. I don't think the Jim Crow's Pink Slip part is going to change. The subtitle may shorten a bit.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I know I speak on behalf of Casey and Peter. Thank you for coming on Ed's Not Dead. Dr. Leslie Fenwick is the Dean Emeritus of Howard University School of Education. I'll call you Dr. Fenwick one last time. Thanks. Thanks for coming on Ed's Not Dead. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Dr. Dodd, Peter, Casey. Thank you. I appreciate you all.
Thank you.
It's like to be here.
Welcome back to Ed's Not Dead. I'm Robbie Dodd. I'm still your co-host. Well, that was an incredible interview. Thank you, Mr. Siddons, Mr. Crable. I don't know why I'm thanking you, Peter. Mr. Siddons, that was a great get. Dr. Fenwick, let's see if I can pronounce Emeritus.
There you go.
Yes, Dean Emeritus of the School of Education.
If you want to,
I love the long form NPR interview. I hope our audience likes it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Usually we cut them off edit
Didn't
them
need
down.
to.
But yeah, no, I like longer interviews. Yeah, I was gonna say something, but I forgot what it was.
Say something very profound.
She was one of those speakers that I just, she just sucked you in. She was so incredibly knowledgeable, and I am a bit surprised that she didn't get selected as the Secretary of Education.
Yeah, I agree. She would have been a great addition. Yeah,
I think the only thing we have to do is now we have to interview Secretary Cardona.
That's right.
Compare apples to apples,
That's
we
true.
do need to do that.
Navigate the bureaucracy of Department of Ed communications team.
I'll work on it.
There you go. Do it, Casey.
I email Betsy DeVos every week. Nothing.
Find us jobs. I haven't even said. God, I just realized that we haven't said the phrase "Dear Betsy" in quite a while. It's kind of dropped from our.
It's nice. Though.
It's just gone. Like it was.
I thought I would be upset about the segment going, but
I haven't given it a single second of thought.
Not at all.
Has there been any desire for it out there in the Ed's Not Dead audience world?
I think everybody's in the same.
Relieved.
Yeah,
they were ready to move on.
Yep.
Well, it was a killer segment. It was starting to get tired towards the end.
It was. Yeah.
All right.
Just like her.
One thing that never goes away is the end of the show, Ed's Not Dead, Casey quiz.
Much to your chagrin, baby.
This is the second quiz of the show. Dr. Fenwick availed herself admirably in your ridiculous Fenwick quiz.
Do you want to have her bonus question? Real quick?
Yeah, sure. Add it on there.
All right. I'll just say it right here. The Fenwick number was named by Matt Fenwick, a blogger from Alberta, in 2007. The Fenwick number is a sports statistic model that helps predict scoring in which sport?
Hockey.
Very good. Hockey's the answer.
I mean, clearly, Alberta. Come on.
That's right. I'm trying to make my quiz questions a little better.
Is it a wins above replacement statistic?
No,
Crable likes those.
It's a way to predict scoring in some way using this thing called the
Fenwick number.
No, the Fenwick number uses a system that I can't remember what it was.
This is the guy that claimed he could teach calculus.
Yeah, right. Oh boy,
I could teach it.
Given my current experience teaching online, I would say I renege on that.
That come on, you could do it. I'm just busting your chops.
So here's a piece of Betsy DeVos trivia for you.
Ooh.
How much money did she make in her 4 years in Trump's cabinet?
With Blackwater?
Zero.
With whatever.
Outside of her federal government salary?
Yeah, just her outside business, whatever.
Through her inheritance of Amway, I would assume, and investments. I'm going to say 4 years, I'm going to say $200 million.
400 million.
225 million.
Wow.
Yeah. Robbie knows how the high flyers roll.
Man,
she knows about compounding interest.
There you go. I'm sure she gave
220 million for 4 years of denigrating public institutions.
Yeah.
The other, I just looked her up and then just hit news. And the other top one was they made decisions on student loan forgiveness in 12 minutes.
Ah, there you go.
Oh, nice.
Not surprising at all.
Nice.
Anyway, that makes me a little upset. So let's go on to nicer things.
All right, let's go with the quiz.
All right. So, Dr. Dodd, since you answered my bonus question correct the first time, you get to pick. Do you want quiz A or quiz B?
Oh, that's informative. Let's go with quiz A.
All right. Number one. This is a current events quiz, by the way.
Okay.
All right.
Crable's good at these.
Multiple choice. Number one. Who is confirmed as the new Secretary of the Interior, becoming the first Native American ever? No, it's for Robbie. To become a presidential cabinet member. A, Marcia Fudge, B, Deb Haaland, or C, Jennifer Granholm.
That would be B, Deb Haaland. And
correct.
I had no idea until Crable said it.
See, that's what you get. And,
that was a shout out. I thought you just shouted it out. You didn't say.
No,
I did know she was Native American, but I can't. I'm not really great with the names.
Well, there you go. You got it. It's the kid in class that yells out the right answer. You know what I mean?
Everybody benefits.
Number two, airplanes were grounded and schools were closed as the largest dust storm in a decade swept across which country? A, Argentina, B, China, or C, Somalia?
This is for Crable.
No, this is for you, Dr. Dodd.
Oh, I thought it was for me.
Sorry.
So you were.
I get quiz B.
I'm getting quiz A, and he's getting quiz B.
Correct.
That would have been helpful to explain.
I apologize.
Yeah.
I thought
Teacher sit-ins.
And how are we comparing our scores? These are different quizzes. Okay.
By points.
China, Argentina,
or Somalia.
Ooh. Argentina or Somalia. Patagonia is in Argentina.
Patagonia.
And it's summer. It was summer there. When is it? This is recently?
Yes. Just this past week.
But I picture Somalia as fairly arid. I think I'm going to go Somalia.
It's actually China. The desert near adjacent Mongolia is slowly creeping in because of development. It might be the Gobi Desert.
It's the steppe.
Number 3, Russia recalled its ambassador to the U.S. after President Biden called Russian President Putin a what in a TV interview? A, a grifter, B, a killer, or C, a liar.
Ooh, what did Sleepy Joe say?
I think taking Joe's age here on this one.
I'm going to go. I'm just going to go with liar.
Incorrect. It's killer. Call him a killer. And
I was going to say killer, but I don't know. I'm feeling a little.
Well, it's okay. Let's see what Mr. Krabs does on quiz B.
3 for 3.
Okay.
You ready?
I basically was 0 for 3 because I stole Crable's first answer.
No, you got 1 for 3. You got 1 for 3.
Still got 1.
All right. Dr. Crable, the Fagradal's mountain volcano
Iceland.
in blank
6,000 years.
erupted after being dormant for 6,000 years.
Oh, come on. I would have
Chile, Argentina, or Iceland?
Reykjavik.
Oh, Reykjavik, Iceland is correct. Number 2 for you.
That drone footage is pretty
amazing.
Yeah,
how did it not get taken out?
Yeah,
by
I'm like,
lava?
it went through lava. That's not a thing.
Literally not possible.
lava. Dude, lava.
Hot magma.
I knew
Liquid
it.
hot magma.
Dr. Evil was coming.
Number 2, for a 4th year in a row, what country was named the happiest country in the world in the UN World Happiness Report? A, Sweden, B, Finland, or C, France?
Finland.
Correct answer is Finland. 2 for 2.
That's right.
And number
All right,
3,
I lost.
I know
number
everything.
3,
about
which
Finland.
item was released from the International Space Station, becoming the heaviest single piece of garbage ever jettisoned from the station? Is it A, the HAL 9000 computer, B, a weather satellite?
The HAL 9000. That's a lie.
B, a weather satellite, or C, a battery pallet?
A battery pallet.
That's a lucky
Correct,
guess.
a battery pallet.
He did not know that. That sounded good.
So I have 2 bonus questions just in case. Do you want to hear them? They're sports related for
I'll
you.
get 'em.
Sports.
Oh, sports. Okay. Now
I'll
hold
get
on.
them both right. Don't worry.
No, you're gonna
put Robbie to shame today.
You're gonna ask.
Do you want me to ask them separately?
No,
we shout them out.
Simultaneously. Okay.
Yes.
First question. This university was forced to pull out of its let me finish the question. Forced to pull out of its NCAA tournament game with the University of Oregon after
VCU.
reporting multiple positive coronavirus tests. What did you say?
VCU.
VCU is correct. And the last one is something you probably don't know. Ryan Fitzpatrick is the new quarterback for the Washington football team, giving him a chance to start and throw a touchdown pass for a record. How many NFL teams?
9.
9, and he went to Harvard.
9 is correct. Mr. Crable runs the board.
Booyah. Highest ever score in the Wonderlic.
Wow.
He did have the highest Wonderlic score, didn't he?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
He
It's a
throws,
standardized assessment, Casey. That's all you need to know.
he throws a lot of pickles for somebody who had a good Wonderlic
A
score.
lot of pickles.
Doesn't he?
He does.
He does. He wouldn't be my pick, Mr. Krabs. How do you feel about that?
Oh, it's
okay.
It's fine.
Yeah.
For a year. Who cares?
He does a really fantastic post game interview.
He does, and he's got a great beard.
He does have a great beard.
Something to be
all right.
said for that.
Mr. Siddons, great quiz, Mr. Krabs.
Thank
great.
you.
Mr. Krabs was on his A game tonight.
Yeah.
Doesn't usually happen.
Man, oh man.
That was
Proud of you guys.
That was impressive. Those were good. Can we do an all sports quiz at one point in time so I can
like mainstream sports or like like
No, not like
rifling and
no shuttlecock.
No,
we want mainstream sports. So me and Mr. Krabs can go head to head.
So no curling questions.
No curling questions.
Okay, got it. Okay, I will work on it with my massive sports quiz acumen.
You have a lot to draw back on.
I have a huge file folder back there.
All right, fellas, when this episode comes out, we will be in spring break. I know both of you are pretty stoked to have a well-deserved week off.
So excited.
Before we close the show, any big plans other than the 7 yards of mulch that you have to spread?
So excited. No news. Just excited.
Okay. Just for our audience that can't see it. When did he get this feature on Zoom?
I don't know. When we were waiting for you, when you came a half hour late.
Okay, right now he has an eye patch and a Pirates hat superimposed over his bald head. Now
just discovered it.
Okay. All right. Now I can't focus. Mr. Krabs, let's go to you because he's
weather pending. I might take the boys backpacking for the first time.
Bring those frog nets.
Oh yeah, so we went again.
Did you go?
We went twice. Yeah, the first time we went to one pond and it was pretty good. Caught a bunch of tadpoles. Only caught one frog. And then on the way out, we passed this other little pond that was like just insane with frogs. So we came back the next weekend, but if you don't come in the right weekend, they're not there.
All right, I'm gonna take you and the kids to one of my secret ponds. Let's do it in April or May.
Yeah. The other thing I need is when you steal their eggs, when you steal the frog babies, how to bring them home and hatch them because I've stolen the eggs, but have not actually had.
Boy,
I don't think they're gonna hatch.
Well, no, they take a while to hatch. All you need is an aquarium with water and stick them outside on your back porch and not in direct sunlight.
Okay, well maybe then.
They should be fine. It takes a while, but they don't hatch overnight.
I thought it was going to happen in like 2 days.
He thinks it's the sped up camera.
You should tell August to go out there and sit on them, and they'll hatch.
He would do it. Yeah.
Just watch really carefully.
All right, Mr. Siddons, you don't have anything else going on besides mulch spreading over.
My folks are coming down, and they're gonna see Frida for the first time since August.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be a good time.
Yeah, they're excited. In person, I should say.
I'm going to do a little fishing.
Nice.
The middle of next week. I'm excited.
What are you fishing for?
I'm fishing for some trout, Mr. Siddons.
In this weather? Is it a little warm for it?
No, this is trout season. March, April, and May. That's the three best months. By June, it gets a little warm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to be out in the mountains, so I'm excited about that. I'm going with my buddy Jerry.
Nice.
And I'm going to outfish him, and it's going to be fun.
Nice.
All right. As always, Ed's Not Dead is brought to you by Ed's Not Dead Media, a podcast media company that curates high-quality audio stories across a variety of genres. Before we get off, Mr. Sid's Pandemic Pass update.
One more interview, one more show. It's coming out next Thursday. Big guest. Tune in. I thought it was going to be today. It's not. It's next Thursday. Last one.
Next Thursday.
Big
Thursday.
guest.
Thursday the what? You got a date for us?
Thursday. Whatever next Thursday is.
All right. I just so happen to have my Outlook. So let's say Thursday the
April
1st.
Yeah.
Oh, not
right.
April Fool's Day.
You're not.
Well, let me tell you. Want me to tell you who the guest is?
Yeah, but last episode it was going to be a surprise. I thought.
Well, do you want to know, or do you want me to not? I can say it now.
Yeah, say it.
Well, it's going to be Zaretta Hammond.
Oh, you're
Big
lying.
Big get.
On Pandemic Pass, not on Ed's Not Dead.
And there's a second kind of special guest included in this. And I shouldn't say kind of. There's a special guest that will be joining me as well.
What? I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
A co-interviewer?
Uh-huh.
Who is it?
Oh, I can't tell you that. You have to listen in. You have to listen in. We're recording on Monday morning.
All right. That's exciting. So,
and I'm catching her. So I caught her, Zaretta, before she's going in her. She calls it her writing cave because she's going in a writing cave for the next 2 months. She's working on 2 different books, so that's a big deal. And I caught her right before she went in and closed the door to that writing cave. So she's been very gracious, and so we're excited.
Okay, good job. So folks, don't miss Pandemic Pass, out April 1st with Zaretta Hammond and, as of now, an unknown co-interviewer. That's going to be a big get. I can just tell.
Exciting.
All right. Once again, thank you to Dr. Leslie Fenwick, Dean Emeritus of Howard University School of Education. We really appreciated having her on the show. We hope you enjoyed the interview as much as we did. Make sure you check out our website at edsnotdead.com and also Twitter, edsnotdeadpc. All right, boys. It's good to see you. Have a wonderful spring break. Thanks, as always, folks, for tuning in to Ed's Not Dead.
Make sure you subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.
And we will talk to you soon. See you, Peter. See you, Casey.
Bye.
Bye.